Welcome back. In this set of videos, I'm going to talk through the principles of the Earth First movement as expressed in this 1980 memo, and just talk a little bit about what they mean and what are some potential objections that one might make to them. So the principles, I think they're pretty straightforward. There's a claim that wilderness has a right to exist for its own sake. So you can again see a parallel with some of the earlier, the other kind of anthropocentric positions that have been articulated. All life forms from virus to the great whales have an inherent and equal right to existence. So everything has an equal right to existence, everything that's alive. Humankind is no greater than any other form of life and has no legitimate claim to dominate Earth. So a claim, very much a claim against a kind of speciesism in favor of human beings. Humankind, through overpopulation, anthropocentrism, industrialization, excessive energy consumption, resource extraction, state capitalism, father figure hierarchies, imperialism, pollution, and natural area destruction threatens the basic life processes of Earth. So here we have an identification of humankind and a variety of things that human beings are doing as an enemy of the Earth, as a not enemy, but a mortal threat to the Earth. All human decisions should consider Earth first, humankind second. So that's in a way a statement of the principle that gives the group its name. Anything we do should be about the Earth first and not ourselves first. The only true test of morality is whether an action, individual, social, or political, benefits Earth. So you can compare this with Leopold's standard of the morality of an action as whether it increases the stability, integrity, and beauty of the biotic community. That's sort of similar to what this is saying. This is saying that in the same way, there's one test of morality, just like Leopold had proposed, but Foreman is articulating it slightly differently. He's saying it's whether an action, individual, social, or political, so whether any action of any group, any human group, individual or social, benefits the Earth. Humankind will be happier, healthier, more secure, and more comfortable in a society that recognizes humanity's true biological nature and which is in dynamic harmony with the total biosphere. So it's a promise that we'll be happier if we follow these principles and become less anthropocentric. Political compromise has no place in the defense of Earth. Again, this is part of what gives Earth First its radical quality, that they didn't want to compromise anymore. They didn't want to make concessions to, say, anthropocentrists. They wanted to push for the defense of Earth as the primary objective and the primary goal of all of their activity, and the primary commitment for everything that they did, and not compromise on that. And then finally, Earth is goddess and the proper object of human worship. So make of that what you will. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by it, but clearly some kind of religious component or spiritual component to their proposal. Should we agree with these principles? Well, to say that wilderness or life forms of different kinds have a right to existence, I think there's a question about what does that right entail? What does that mean to say that a virus has a right to existence? Does it mean that if we develop vaccines that reduce the propagation of viruses, or if our immune systems kill off viruses, that we've done something wrong because we've interrupted the right of that thing to exist? What counts as respecting the right of something to exist versus not respecting it? Wilderness, what is wilderness? I mean, if wilderness is just nature that's not affected by humans in any way, then, it's questionable why say that there are some parts of the Earth that aren't affected by humans at all. Does Foreman want to say that those parts right now have a right not to be touched? Does he want to say that only some proportion of them do? How do we draw that distinction? Does he say that there's some kind of right, like he's thinking of wilderness as a thing that has the right to exist in a certain quantity? So maybe wilderness has a right to exist as 60% of the Earth. 60% of the Earth has a right, or there's a right, there's a right. But what is it that has the right? I mean, is it a particular patch of wilderness? If it's wilderness as such, it's kind of crazy to think that wilderness as such can have a right. I don't even know what it means to say that. So I realize that this is a little bit, I'm just talking through some thoughts about how to interpret these claims. But I think an important thing is, like, when we say that we say that a human being has a right, say that a human being has a right not to be arrested without being told what the charges are. What that claim means is that if anyone were to, like any police officer or any representative of the law were to put someone under arrest, that is, like, forcibly take them or insist or require that they go somewhere without telling them what the charges were, then they would have violated that person's right. So it's very clear, and it's something that we could, like, actually appeal to in a court of law. It's very clear what that right is. It's not that hard to, it's been articulated in a clear way, and it's clear how to apply it. There might be a few fuzzy cases, but for the most part, it's clear. But these two claims to rights, it's very unclear what exactly is being claimed and how to apply them. So it's very hard to, I think, in good conscience, when you recognize that, it's very hard to just step up and say, oh, I agree with that, because we don't know what we're agreeing to. We don't know what precisely is being proposed with those two claims. We go on to the next claims. Humankind is no greater than any other form of life on Earth. Okay, so that's a question. What, greater in what sense? Does he mean greater in the sense of, like, shouldn't be preferred? But remember, Sober gave the example of a single human being and a single mosquito. It seems strange to say that a human being's life shouldn't be preferred by other human beings to the life of a mosquito. That we should let a human die to preserve the life of a mosquito seems strange. I mean, maybe there are really extreme cases where it would make sense, but the point is that in the average case, if it's just a question of, like, choosing between a human living or dying and a mosquito living or dying, it just seems crazy to say that we should treat each of those lives as equally valuable. And maybe he means something else by no greater than any other form of life, than just, like, deserves more moral consideration. But at least the moral consideration piece, I think, that application of this principle would be very questionable. About the fourth point, we can ask whether humans really are this much of a threat, how much they are a threat, and is the threat something that comes, I mean, I think Foreman's pretty clear, the threat is something that comes from specific human actions. So if humans change those actions, that they might be less of a threat, but as they are currently acting, they are a significant threat. But there may be some way, something questionable about just presenting humans so much as the enemy as this principle does. The next principle claims we should consider Earth first and human second. It's worth questioning whether you agree with that. Is that true? Should we do that? The next question, that there's only one test of morality, and that's whether an action, individual or social, benefits Earth. Again, I think it's very questionable. Aren't there plausibly other tests? Aren't there other moral matters that are important too? I mean, we could ask whether something benefits or hurts Earth, but asking whether it benefits or hurts a certain large group of people might also be relevant. Humankind will be healthier, happier, more secure, and more comfortable. Good. Again, a question, like, is that necessarily true? And do you think political compromise really has no place? I mean, if this is particularly, so one kind of, criticism you can make here is that it's not fair to other people to not compromise with them, because if other people have different opinions than you do, then you ought to be willing to at least compromise to some extent in the interests of democratic decision making, for instance. So that's one kind of objection. But another kind of objection is that Another kind of objection is that if you're not willing to compromise at all, then you might be actually less effective at getting something like the results that you want. So if you think about how a lot of politics in the real world gets done, it often involves a lot of compromise and a lot of trading. And you set out wanting one thing and asking for that, but since you in a lot of politics have to negotiate with other representatives of other parties and political positions, or just have to negotiate with or deal with a system that's already set up in a way that makes the things that you want to have happen very, very difficult to do, you often have to compromise in order to get things done. I mean, think about how effective would any leader be who wasn't willing to compromise at all about anything. That leader would run into a lot of problems. So it's questionable. This is the second reason to question this next to last principle. It's questionable whether that's even the most effective way to pursue environmental goals.